Have you ever sat in a room with someone you love and felt completely invisible? They didn't yell. They didn't slam doors. They didn't raise their voice. But somehow, you still walked away feeling small, confused, and like you'd done something wrong. That's the kind of emotional abuse no one talks about enough, the kind that hides behind silence, politeness, or even a soft smile. It's the kind where nothing bad is said out loud, but your heart knows something's off. You don't feel safe. You don't feel seen. You just feel drained. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know, you're not imagining things. You're not being too sensitive. And you're definitely not alone. Emotional abuse doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes, it's the absence of kindness. The quiet withholding of affection. The long silences when you try to speak up. And often, it's most painful when it comes from the people closest to you, a partner, a grown child, even someone you've worked with for years. Let's talk about that today. The quiet kind of manipulation that leaves you second-guessing yourself. Because once you start to see it clearly, you can begin to take your power back. Here's what it can look like. You're trying to explain how you feel. Maybe you say something simple, like "it hurt my feelings when you didn't check on me after my surgery." And the other person pauses. Then says, "Nothing." They change the subject. Or they go silent for days. They don't yell. They don't apologize either. They just shut down. And suddenly, you're the one who feels guilty for even bringing it up. This is called emotional withdrawal. And it's a quiet but powerful form of control. When someone refuses to engage with your feelings, when they act like your pain doesn't exist, they're telling you something, that your emotions are inconvenient. That your needs are too much. That silence is safer than honesty. And over time, you stop speaking up. You learn to keep things to yourself. Not because you're okay, but because you're tired of the punishment that comes after. Let me give you another example. You ask a simple question. "Hey, what time will you be home?" Or, "Can we talk about what happened the other day?" And they answer with a tone. Not angry. Just cold. Detached. Dismissive. You know that voice. The one that makes you feel like you just made a mistake, like you asked too much, wanted too much. They might even say, "Why are you always so emotional?" Or, "I didn't say anything wrong." And technically, they didn't. But you still walk away feeling ashamed. Like you're the problem. That's the trap. They keep their hands clean. They don't scream. But they twist the moment just enough so that you carry the blame. This kind of emotional control is hard to name. There are no bruises. No big scenes. Nothing you could point to and say, "See? That was cruel." But it chips away at you. Little by little. You start apologizing for things that aren't wrong. You stop asking for what you need. You shrink yourself down just to keep the peace. And that's what they count on, that if they stay calm enough, and quiet enough, you'll start thinking it's all in your head. But let me say this clearly, emotional pain doesn't have to be loud to be real. Just because someone says, "I never raised my voice," doesn't mean they didn't hurt you. Just because they didn't insult you doesn't mean they didn't make you feel worthless. The damage is in the disconnection. In the way they ignore your boundaries. In the way they make you question your worth, without ever saying a single cruel word. If you've experienced this kind of treatment, I want you to hear something important. You didn't imagine it. You didn't make it up. And you are not being too sensitive. You're responding to something real, a pattern that's hard to explain, but deeply damaging over time. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be treated with basic emotional respect, even when things are hard. You deserve warmth. Presence. Truth. And if someone in your life is withholding those things, that's not your fault. That's their choice. And you don't have to keep paying the emotional price for their silence. There are ways to gently hold your ground. To speak your truth without begging for permission. To stop chasing connection from someone who only gives you silence in return. And we'll talk more about that, together. Because quiet abuse is still abuse. And your peace matters. Let's keep going. Let's talk about what it feels like when someone says all the right things, but you still walk away feeling worse. They say, "I just want what's best for you." Or, "You're overthinking it." Maybe even, "You know I love you, right?" But somehow, their tone cuts deep. Their timing feels off. And their words leave you more confused than comforted. This is what emotional manipulation often sounds like: calm, careful, polished. Not explosive. Not cruel. Just quietly dismissive. They don't have to raise their voice to make you question your reality. All they have to do is plant doubt. And women, especially women who were taught to keep the peace, often absorb that doubt as guilt. I must have misunderstood. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe it's my fault. Let me tell you something you might need to hear out loud. It's not your job to read between the lines, to twist yourself into knots trying to make sense of mixed signals. Real love doesn't leave you in emotional limbo. Real love doesn't confuse your heart. And when someone makes you feel like you can never get it quite right, even though they say they care, that's not love. That's control. One woman told me about her daughter. Grown woman, with kids of her own. Every time this mother said something even slightly vulnerable, like "I miss seeing you," her daughter would go quiet. Not rude. Just, nothing. Then later, she'd send a picture of the grandkids with a casual "Hey mom," like nothing happened. And this mother, bless her heart, would feel so guilty for pushing. She'd blame herself for the silence. She'd tell herself, "Maybe I was too emotional. I don't want to drive her away." But that silence? That quiet gap after an honest, human expression? That was punishment. That was control. And no matter how old we are, we still ache for connection, especially with the people we love. So when it's dangled in front of us like a reward, or withheld like a consequence, it leaves deep emotional scars. Now here's something practical, something you can say to yourself when you're on the receiving end of this quiet cruelty. If I have to shrink to keep this connection, it's not real connection. Let that sink in. You don't have to silence your needs just to stay close to someone. You don't have to smile through confusion, or stay quiet when something hurts, just to avoid rocking the boat. If someone only shows up when you're agreeable, quiet, or emotionally easy, that's not a relationship. That's a performance. And you deserve more than that. Here's another gentle truth. The longer you live in these silent emotional dynamics, the harder it becomes to trust your own voice. You start walking on eggshells. You scan for signs. You think twice before speaking up. And that's not peace. That's survival. But healing, real healing, means slowly learning to say, "That felt dismissive," even if they didn't raise their voice. "I'm allowed to feel hurt, even if they said they meant well. I don't need to justify my pain to someone who refuses to see it." Sometimes that's all it takes to shift the power back to where it belongs, inside you. Because the truth is, you've spent too many years making excuses for people who never made room for your truth. It's okay to stop doing that now. You are not too emotional. You are not difficult. You are not broken. You are just someone who has learned, maybe the hard way, that love without respect is not love at all. And silence, even when it's polite, can still be violent. You deserve full volume connection. Real presence. Emotional safety. And the first step to reclaiming that? Is naming what you feel. Without shame. Even if they roll their eyes. Even if they go quiet. Even if they say, "You're being dramatic." You say, "This matters to me." And then you breathe. You hold your ground. You let the discomfort pass. Because their silence is not more powerful than your truth. You have every right to speak up, gently, firmly, honestly, and expect respect in return. And if they can't give that? That doesn't make you wrong. It just means they're not willing to meet you where you truly are. And that's on them. Not on you. Let's keep going. So what do you do when someone's hurting you quietly? When they don't yell or call you names, but somehow you still feel drained, unsure, even a little ashamed after talking to them? You pause. You get still. And you ask yourself one very simple question. How do I feel when I leave the conversation? Do you feel heard? Or do you feel smaller? Do you feel safe? Or slightly off balance? Because no matter how calm someone sounds, if your body is tight, if your heart feels anxious, if your voice gets smaller, that's your nervous system talking. That's your wisdom trying to get your attention. See, emotional abuse isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the sigh. The side eye. The way they suddenly go cold when you set a boundary. Sometimes it's how they forget your needs, again and again, and make you feel guilty for even mentioning it. It can sound like, "Why are you so sensitive? I guess I just can't say anything right. I'm just being honest." But it's not real honesty if it leaves you confused and crushed. It's not real love if it only flows when you're convenient. And it's not your fault if someone chooses control over connection. If you've spent years, or decades, trying to make it work, trying to be easier, quieter, less emotional, trying to be the bigger person, then maybe it's time to ask, why am I always the one bending? You're not too much. You're not the problem. You're someone who values peace, and that's a beautiful thing. But peace doesn't mean silence. Peace doesn't mean shrinking. Peace means safety. Peace means honesty. Peace means mutual care. And if someone is only comfortable around you when you're uncomfortable with yourself, that's not peace. That's a performance. You don't owe anyone your silence just to keep them from leaving. You don't owe anyone your trust just because they say the right words. Love without safety is not love. Respect without consistency is not respect. And just because someone isn't yelling, doesn't mean they aren't hurting you. Now, this part is hard, but freeing. Some people will never change. Not because you didn't try hard enough, but because your clarity threatens their comfort. When you name what's real, when you say, "That felt dismissive," or "I don't feel safe when you ignore me," you break their script. And people who rely on quiet control don't like having their patterns seen. They'll shift blame. They'll go silent. They'll act like you are the unstable one. That doesn't make you wrong. That makes you awake. And waking up can feel lonely at first. You may lose some relationships. You may cry more than you expected. You may wonder, is it worth it? But let me tell you this. Your peace is worth it. Your truth is worth it. You are worth it. You've lived long enough to know what fake love feels like. You've seen what happens when you give too many second chances. And now it's time for something different. A life where you trust your gut. Where you speak without guilt. Where your no is enough. And where you stop chasing clarity from people who never gave it willingly. You deserve to feel safe in your own relationships. You deserve to feel seen, not just tolerated. You deserve softness, and honesty, and respect that doesn't come at the cost of your self-worth. And no, it's not too late. Not at 35. Not at 60. Not at 75. You're not starting over. You're finally starting real. So take a breath. Put your hand over your heart. And say this with me. I see the quiet ways they tried to control me. I see it now. And I release it. If this spoke to your experience, I'd love to hear your story in the comments, or even just a word that helped you feel seen. And if you want more reminders that you are not crazy, not too sensitive, and not alone, go ahead and subscribe. You're not here to be someone's emotional sponge. You're here to be whole. And it's not too late to claim your peace. Not even close.